was eating pizza and pasta and pizza and pasta and pizza and pasta and pasta and pizza. These ruins are popping. It's Pompeii, okay? Hi, welcome back to Dreams Traveled. I'm Kalia, and this is episode 2 of being in Italy. I went from Tropea, Italy, to Pompeii. The ride was about 6 hours. The view from that train ride was so gorgeous. Wow. I was going north along the coast of Italy, and all I could see was the beautiful blue water. It was incredible. I arrived in Pompeii around 7 p.m. I got to the hostel, and the owners of the hostel are actually archaeologists, and they were so nice and so helpful. I really appreciated them, and I loved them. But I'm gonna throw shade and tea on their hostel because it wasn't great. It was a very good cheap price, but the bedding looked like it came from an older woman who had just passed. In the dorm, there's 2 French girls that are also staying with me. I set my things out of my hostel and I went to have dinner because I was starving. I hadn't eaten all day. So I went to a place called Pizza and Pasta right next to my hostel. It was pretty good. Yeah, it was good. Co-owner was there and he kept talking to me. He was a lot older and he was just so Italian. He was super sweet. He kept telling me about these melons that grow at the bottom of the volcano. He had me try this melon with basil. Mwah. Wow, one of the best things I've ever eaten. So I go to pay. I'm gonna pay with my card, and he said,
"We don't accept card, we only accept cash."
And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Let me give you my ID so you can hold on to it while I go leave and get money out of my bank." And he said,
"No, it's okay, I trust you."
And I thought that was just so sweet because it just goes to show that Italians are all about, family, and they trust each other. The people in Italy, that they're so nice.
Mozzerella.
After dinner, I go to my hostel room, right? The door is open and it's dark inside. So in my mind, I'm like, there's 2 French girls. I know they left. And they left the door open to the hostel and all my things are inside. As I'm thinking all this, I'm opening the door and I go, why did these bitches? I turn on the light and I look and they're literally sleeping in bed. They heard me call them bitches. I was so mortified. I was so embarrassed. I stood in the doorway like this. They basically ignored me the rest of the time and were rude to me, as they should have been, because I called them bitches. As I was going to sleep, I literally could not sleep because I just kept thinking, I'm so grateful, I'm so lucky, I'm so blessed. For tomorrow, I'm gonna see the ruins of Pompeii in Italy and have pizza. Like, oh, that was my life!
Mozzerella.
When you're walking to Pompeii, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be trying to lure you in so that they could sell you stuff because you are a tourist.
You're going to Pompeii? Come inside, come inside. English? Spanish? French?
They're trying to get any language out of you. I would say, no, not today. So I buy my ticket. The lady tells me that there's a free audio guide that comes with the ticket if you scan it. I wasn't able to figure out the scanning, so I just bought a Pompeii app that told me everything about each place in Pompeii. That was super helpful.
Mozzerella.
To be somewhere that is so ancient, I just can't put it into words. I was shocked how big Pompeii was. When I went, I was like,
okay, this is gonna be like a couple cute streets, a little theater, right, we're done, right?
I get there, it's 150 acres big. Now, some of you may ask, what is Pompeii? Pompeii is basically a village that's been there since the 1st century, originally inhabited by Greeks and then taken over by Romans in the 3rd century. Now, what makes Pompeii so special is that Pompeii sits on Mount Vesuvius. This is a volcano. When the people of Pompeii were living there, the volcano had erupted in 1800 years. So they had no idea that it was a volcano. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius happened in 79 AD. It killed majority of the people. Pompeii remained undiscovered for 1500 years. In 1599, they were trying to make a water tunnel when they discovered Pompeii. Real excavation didn't begin until the 1700s. The thick volcano ash ash perfectly preserved all the ancient objects for centuries. As they were unearthing the city, archaeologists found empty spaces between the ash layers, showing where there once had been human bodies. As they dug through the ash, they injected plaster between the ash layers. So what you see here are plasters of bodies. These are the forms that these people last took as the volcano was erupting. You can see them taking cover. We see dogs, we see babies, we see a horse, we see people.
Mozzarella.
As you can see in this picture, this is actually graffiti. But this graffiti is a lot different than the graffiti nowadays. The graffiti in Pompeii showed private messages, public announcements, and election notices. So this is a way for them to communicate with everyone. This is what's coming up. The streets were actually entirely wet from rain, from animal waste, from all different kinds of murky things you do not want your feet in would go through the street. So they created these huge stones for people to walk on to get across if need be.
Mozzarella.
The Lumpanar is a brothel. There were over 20 brothels in Pompeii, but the Lumpanar was a purpose-built brothel. In this brothel house, there were 10 windowless rooms. This is where prostitutes would entertain their guests. Their guests were usually of working class. The wealthy men had enough money to maintain a mistress, and they also could afford their own sex slaves. So many wealthy men would have sex slaves live in their home, which is crazy. What makes this place very popular and famous for tourists is that on the walls, there's a lot of erotic images of people engaging in intercourse. So some believe that these paintings were a kind of menu, right? You could look at the wall and say, "Huh, I like that position. Let me get that with the side of fries." And the prostitute's like, "Okay, you got it, coming right up." Others believed actually that these images glamorized sex because what actually transpired inside these hostels was very, very grim. These slaves were basically abused. The manager of the brothel, known as a leno, would receive all the money. Now, these women were actually slaves. They were taken from Greece and put into the sex trafficking industry. A customer could purchase services in exchange for 2 loaves of bread and half a liter of wine.
Mozzarella.
This is an example of what a kitchen would look like in the 1st century. As you can see, these huge, big holes in the countertops where they would, place wood, fire to cook food. This is the house of the tragic poet. It was built at the end of the 1st century. This is an example of imperial age property. There is a black and white mosaic on the floor which reads Cava Cain, meaning beware of dog. People in the 1st century were putting pictures of dogs on their front doorstep and saying beware of dogs so people wouldn't steal from them. That's not something new, honey. That's been there since Pompeii, honey, since the 1st century.
Mozzarella.
This is really cool. So there were some forum baths. The forum baths functioned as a place to get clean and to socialize. Townspeople couldn't afford bathrooms in their own homes. They would go to the forum baths and bathe themselves. Can you imagine doing that now? Instead of going to their bathroom to shower, you would go to a public place and shower with a whole bunch of people. It's like the club, but there's no music and there's water instead.
Mozzarella.
Pompeii has 3 different theaters, okay? They have the small theater, the large theater, and the amphitheater. The amphitheater was constructed after the Romans took rule in 70 BC. The amphitheater can hold up to 20,000 people. And yes, it's a lot like the Colosseum in Rome. This is where a lot of gladiator fights would happen, circus events, athletic spectacles, and displays involving wild animals. This is where the public and the elite would come together to view these forms of entertainment. Now, the large theater was constructed, they believe, by the Greeks in 2nd century BC. The large theater can hold 5,000 spectators, and it had some renovations in 1990 and 2008. There were 3 different sections in the theater. We have the Summa Cava, which was for the townspeople, the ordinary people, right? It was the furthest from the stage, it was the cheaper seats. Then we have the media cavea, which is for the middle class. We have the ima cavea, which had the best views. It was reserved for the highest ranking people like senators and magistrates. The basilica is the oldest building in Pompeii, and it was constructed pre-Roman times. The basilica had 28 columns, which are now stumps, as you can see in the pictures. But I want you to imagine these columns being roof tall back then, like how they would be. So just think about the extravagance of 28 tall columns to get to this basilica. How beautiful. The basilica was where business was discussed, legal and commercial issues of the city, along with justice, were handled in the basilica.
Mozzarella.
After Pompeii, I went and ate at a place called Pizzeria, Alleria, and I had a pizza. Oh, yeah. Oh, this pizza was so freaking good. It was a buffalo mozzarella pizza, and wow. I got back to my hostel, rested a bit, and went out to see the Vigini Rosani church. Opened in 1879. This church really took my breath away because there was so much gold paintings, not a speck of the interior was left blank. After seeing the church, I went and got a sorbet at a cafe that had a view of the church and the bell tower. And it was absolutely just such a beautiful moment. So I'm just gonna read this excerpt that I wrote from my journal. I hear shoes hitting cobblestone streets, plates, cutlery, bell ringing for pickup, the Italian that falls into my ears, no phones, just conversations, practicing presence. Time is slow, it is all being, the sun is setting, it's quite lovely.
Mozzarella.
Basically just spent one day in Pompeii. You don't have to be there any longer. As long as you see the ruins and you see the church, that's basically it. I love Pompeii, the pizza, the people, the ruins, everything was so phenomenal about it. Pompeii really speaks volumes to who we are as humans, how we've evolved, what we were able to accomplish in the 1st century, how the volcanic eruption perfectly preserved all ancient objects and the entire city. Like, that's insane. I cannot wait to go back to Pompeii. I'm so grateful to have had that opportunity to see Pompeii. Please subscribe down below so you can keep seeing the series of Kalia in Italy, episode 3 coming soon, honey. Read my description box if you are going to Pompeii, and know that you will be able to travel and you're gonna live your best life pretty soon. Grazie for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.
Buongiorno, prego, grazie, buonasera, italiano, the pizza.
I'm sorry, Italians. That was rude.